Okay, so this is actually a very rare photograph of Jesus that I've started with. So given all the options, I mean, there's a lot of ideas out there about the world, right? It's like going into, those of you who remember Woolworths, you've got that pick and mix stand and you're like, well, I can't get all of them in that cup, but so given all of the options that are out there, why Jesus? Why Jesus? Well, to answer that question, first of all, we need to know what the options are, okay? So here we go. What actually are the alternative options to Jesus? Well, here is a lady called Mary Poplin, Professor Mary Poplin, not Mary Poppins. She works in the States. She is a professor of education and hugely influential. She helps put together the way that people are taught in schools across the States. You know, she's very influential. She has the most remarkable life history. You can read her autobiography. You name it, she's tried it. I'm not kidding you, okay? She has tried everything. Sex, drugs, rock and roll, even at one point dabbling in, like, maybe it was aliens, okay? So she has tried everything. And she's now a Christian, okay? And she reflects back on it all. And she says this: I simply distill worldviews at their most basic level into 4. So she says, actually, you know what? There aren't loads of options. There are 4. That's quite helpful to start narrowing it down a bit, okay? And she says they are material naturalism. I'm going to explain what all of these are, don't worry. Material naturalism, secular humanism, pantheism, and monotheism, right? So suddenly it's not Woolworths anymore, or it's maybe Woolworths now, right? They've got 4 sweets left. So there are these 4 options, and she pushes the point home. She says it's generally possible to trace all philosophies and theories, and even most practical actions, even the things you just do day to day, all the way back to just these 4, okay? So I'm going to give you an overview of what they are, and then say, well, why Jesus? Why would you pick Jesus out of those? Okay. So here we go. Material naturalism. So material naturalism is this. There's particles, there's waves, and that's your lot. Okay? The universe is a bunch of particles, a bunch of waves, and that really is just it. And they've been combined together in weird ways, but essentially the universe is stuff. So how does it answer the big questions about life? Well, what is the meaning of life? There isn't one. There is no meaning, okay? You read Dawkins and he says, at the bottom of it, life has no purpose, it has no meaning. Now, in brackets, we could say, well, maybe reproduce, right? Like, possibly you could say, well, you just want to get your genes to the next generation, okay? But really, that's not a meaning of life. Right, it's just a function or something like that. What about a higher power? Well, there isn't one. There's no higher power. It's just stuff. And what happens to you when you die? Nothing. You're gone. Okay? Inspirational, isn't it? Okay? Now, this is broadly speaking what we teach kids in school. We don't realise we're teaching it, but it basically is. Okay? And, you know, I said to one of my sixth form groups a couple of years ago, I said, isn't it strange that we basically spend around about 14 years saying to you, life is meaningless, there's nothing else out there, and when you're dead, you're gone. And then we go, why are they all so depressed? You know? What's wrong with them? Well, because it's a depressing message, right? Well, anyway, what about secular humanism? Well, secular humanism is a little bit more positive. It says, look, we're cosmic flukes, right? We're cosmic flukes, but we're pretty amazing. So let's eat ice cream. Okay? That's secular humanism. Yes, there's only stuff. Sure, there's just particles and there's just waves. But we're quite special. Isn't it amazing that we're here? And isn't ice cream nice? So, Let's enjoy ourselves. You know, we just happen to be here, but let's make the most of it, okay? And so the meaning of life is enjoy yourself. Okay? You just happen to be here, so now have a good time. Higher power, well, of course, there isn't one. And after death, nothing. Okay? You're dead and gone. But at least you had ice cream. Okay? At least you had ice cream. And so that's secular humanism. It's kind of like a slightly more optimistic material naturalism, but it still ends at the same place. Eternal doom. Okay. What about pantheism? Well, pantheism is a bit odd, okay? It's often very, very vague, and you're trying to pin it down, and you feel like every time you think you've just about understood it, it's gone somewhere else. So there's a sort of vagueness, and there'll be some idea of oneness or of emergence. So some of the ancient Greeks used to say, look, everything is unchanging. And when someone would say, what do you mean it's unchanging? Like, I'm here. They'd say, well, you've emerged from the unchangingness, and then you'll morph back into it. Okay? That's why they're all dead. And then you have these ideas, these variations on it. Loads of variations, including lots of modern variations. You can get loads of books that talk about this sort of stuff now. We're all one, there's a universal oneness, you want to become one with nature somehow. So the meaning of life is to achieve some sort of enlightenment. You know what? You suddenly realise, that it's all one. Yeah, and part of you wants to say, yeah, but what does that mean? And you go, no, don't worry about what it means. Just, get there somehow. The higher power, well, the higher power is kind of everything. And it's also nothing, in that there's no personal higher power running the show, but everything, we're all part of it. And if we really understood, we'd morph back into it. And individualism disappears. Okay? After you're dead, well, you've gone back into this oneness. Right? So it's a little bit strange, but it's very popular. Very popular. In fact, I think, this is a slightly controversial claim, if you look through the history of humanity, I think this is the most common worldview that's ever existed. It just turns up again and again and again in different forms. Okay. But all three of those options leave you with major problems. Okay? What they do is they destroy you. So let me try and talk a little bit about why that is. Why do those worldviews, if you end up going for them, gradually break you? Well, the first issue is this. They all involve relativism that says there really is no right and wrong. There really is no actual right and actual wrong. Just make it up as you go along. All of those views have that. Okay? And that is dangerous. It's dangerous and it's destructive. Okay? Because what it does is it allows people who want to be extremely horrible to be extremely horrible and then claim they're not. And they do the most horrendous things. Okay? Another weird thing that all of those views do is that they involve denying what seems like our common sense. They say, oh, you might think this or that or the other, but you know what? It's an illusion. You might think that there is something special about you, but ultimately there isn't. You might think that life has a meaning or a purpose, but it doesn't. You might think you're an individual, but you aren't. Okay? Everything is about calling everything an illusion of some kind, right? And if you read material naturalist books, they'll say things like, human beings used to think they were special, then we discovered that the sun wasn't going around the earth, we were going around the sun, and ever since then we've understood we're not special. What essentially these views do is at the bottom, they say, right, you've just got to make the most of where you're at now, and your life isn't very important. And if you tell someone that enough, they start to believe it. Right, this is your one shot at it. It's all on your shoulders. If you screw up, that's your fault, and you're not that special anyway. And you know who likes that? The devil likes that, because what does the Bible say the devil wants to do? Rob, kill, and destroy. Okay? So these break people. These views break people. Let's contrast that with the fourth option, monotheism. Monotheism. Now, there are subsets of monotheism. Okay? Here's a second photo of Jesus. And so the belief that there is only one God who's made everything. That's what monotheism basically is. There's only one God, and that God has made everything. But of course, there are different versions of monotheism. Judaism is monotheistic. Islam is monotheistic. And this talk is why Jesus. Okay. Well, in Judaism and Islam, Jesus is not the one supreme creator God. He's a person. He's just a man. Right? In Islam, obviously, he has an exalted status. And in Judaism, he's seen as being deceptive. But he's just a man. Christians believe that Jesus is the God who made the universe. Right? And crucially, this is probably an even more crucial difference in some ways. In Christianity, your salvation depends on his work. Your salvation depends on his work. When someone says to you, why should you go to heaven? Your answer should be, because of him. We do not deserve it. We do not deserve it. Whereas in Judaism and Islam, you've got to earn your own way there. You've got to earn your own way there, right? I want to give you 4 reasons why I think you should make Jesus your choice. Okay? 4 reasons why you should make Jesus your choice. So here we go. First of all, we live in a world that is crying out for authority. Look at what's going on in our parliament. Look what's going on across the pond. We need somebody to have some kind of control, to speak with some sort of authority. You know, everybody is proving to be unreliable. We live in a world of unreliable people, and we're unreliable, and we just think, please, 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 can somebody do something? Right? We're desperate. Well, let me tell you a story about Jesus. Jesus preached a message in a synagogue, and they didn't like it very much. And we're told this: they got up, they drove him out of town. They took him to the brow of the hill on which the town was built in order to throw him off the cliff. Now, I invite you to picture the scene. They are angry. They are angry. They are out of control. A mob mentality has kicked in. We do things in mobs we would never do as individuals, ever. A mob can be murderous even when there's no murderers in the mob, right? And they march him to the edge of the cliff. And what are they going to do? They're going to throw him off it. He's in big trouble. And then we read this: but he walked right through the crowd and he went on his way. I think this is what happened. He's on the edge of the cliff, people screaming, shouting, spitting, shoving, and he turns around. And then he's eyeballing people. And they realise this is a man with authority. And what can he do that no one else on the planet could do? He can start walking. He can walk back through this crowd and he looks at people and they can't meet his eyes. And that Jesus alone can walk with that authority back through a murderous mob. Okay? We need somebody like that. We need somebody like that. But we don't just need someone with authority. We need to be safe. We need someone who can actually look after us. We need somebody where we can let our guard down. So let me tell you another story. Then people brought little children to Jesus for him to place his hands on them and pray for them. Little children. I've got a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old, 2 little girls. They know when someone is safe. They just know. Right? How did these children react to Jesus when the disciples are saying, off you go? Jesus says, come, let them come to me. And do they? You bet they do. They sit on his knee. How could little children do that with this man? Because they knew that they were safe. This is someone who could look after them. Right? So he has authority, but he is safe. When you come to Jesus, you can relax. You can let your guard down. You can stop fighting, and you can just let him hug you. You can sit on his knee, and you're safe. We also need someone who is compassionate, right? Because this world is messed up, and it's hurtful. And most of us are hurting most of the time for some reason or another. And we need someone to come into the mess where we are and love us. Okay? Well, this is an extraordinary story. John's disciples came and took his body. Why? Because John the Baptist has been murdered. He's been murdered in cold blood. He's been beheaded for entertainment. And John was Jesus' best friend. Okay? And it says they went and told Jesus. Jesus has just heard about the murder of his best friend. Just heard it. Okay? Bear that in mind. How would you feel if you'd been told that? Your friend's been murdered for fun in front of a crowd. When Jesus heard what had happened, he withdrew by boat privately to a solitary space. Why did he do that? Because he's heartbroken. He's heartbroken. He needs time out. But what happens? They follow him. Hearing of this, the crowds followed him on foot from the towns. Can you imagine that? All you want is a bit of space. You're heartbroken. And now crowds of people are turning up and saying, I've got a problem, I've got a problem, I've got a problem. Look at the character of Jesus. When Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, did he tell them to go away? He said, guys, I've got stuff I need to work through. No. He had compassion on them. Even though he knows they've got the same murderous hearts, he had compassion on them and healed their sick. It doesn't matter how big your mess is, Jesus will come into the middle of it. And he'll love you. And we need somebody like that. And lastly, Jesus alone, of all the options, is almighty. Let me read you another passage. This is from Revelation chapter 19. John is describing a vision that he's having of Jesus. I saw heaven standing open, and there before me was a white horse whose rider, Jesus, is called Faithful and True. With justice he judges and wages war. His eyes are like blazing fire, and on his head are many crowns. This is the same Jesus that had the children on his knee. He has a name written on him that no one knows but he himself. He's dressed in a robe, dipped in blood. That's his compassion. And his name is the Word of God. That's his authority. The armies of heaven were following him. That's us. The armies of heaven were following him, riding on white horses and dressed in fine linen. This is what Jesus does to us. He puts us in fine clothes, okay, that we don't deserve. White and clean. Coming out of his mouth is a sharp sword with which to strike down the nations. He will rule them with an iron scepter. He treads the winepress of the fury of the wrath of God Almighty, and on his robe and on his thigh he has this name written: King of Kings and Lord of Lords. This is Jesus. Sure, he's gentle Jesus, meek and mild at times, but not always. C.S. Lewis said, he's not a tame lion. Okay. So in summary, let's put it all together. Given all the options, why pick Jesus? Well, Jesus has authority. He's safe. He's compassionate. He's almighty. He's the King of Kings. He's the Lord of Lords. He made us in the first place. He came to be with us in our mess. He understands us because he took on human flesh. And he loves us even though we're close to unlovable. Jesus took our punishment for us. He takes it voluntarily. And he rose again to conquer death. No one else has done that. He saves us. We don't have to save ourselves. He forgives us. And boy, do we need forgiveness. He restores us. We don't have to pick ourselves back up off the floor. He does it. He transforms us. We begin to become a new person through his work. He's God. He's not an option. He, and he alone, is the way and the truth and the life. Amen.